responsibility for what I read. And I know I read it when I was on city council, but, do I know, for example, that President Conyers read it? How would I know that? How would I know if President Pro Tem Watson read it? How would I know that? I can't take responsibility for what other people read or don't read, but I can tell you this. Essentially, the same deal was before council over 6 months or so ago. Now, the substance of the authority did change, but that changed, frankly, the week before Christmas at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that changed because the state Senate was actually trying to pull a coup d'etat, so to speak, in terms of the authority structure. Frankly, we would have wound up with a worse deal had I not been alerted to that and driven to Lansing in order to try to intervene and work out something that would have been better for the city of Detroit. Had I not done that, what you would have wound up with was a 7-member authority with Oakland County controlling 3 of those votes. Because what the Senate was actually trying to do was they were trying to create a direct appointment to that authority for themselves, and they also wanted to have confirmation power over the governor's appointee. At the same time, Oakland County would have had its own appointment. That got killed because when I got the phone call of what was going on, I drove to Lansing, met with the governor, met with Mike Bishop, met with Andy Dillon, and told them, frankly, that is not going to fly, and that is not something that we're going to support. I can't take that to city council. So what then resulted was a series of marathon discussions that began at like 1 o'clock in the morning and went into the wee hours of the morning that resulted in us coming up with the 5-person authority concept whereby all decisions would actually have to be unanimous and all people on the authority would have had veto power, which again, not perfect, but certainly would have been better than an authority where Oakland County had control of 3 votes and potentially would have been in the driver's seat. Now, maybe you could make an argument that says I should have called up all of those council members at 3:30 in the morning and said, look, this is what's going on. But things were moving very fast and very furious at that point. Once it did pass through the legislature later that morning, we immediately reached out to all council members and said, look, this is what happened, this is what the deal is, and we want you to know. And that process never stopped.
We're not trying to have a city council meeting here.
Yeah.
When you step back a little bit and look at this deal, if the legislation, the authority indicates clearly, in clear terms, that the city council has the absolute right to kill this, the question is, when you, in hindsight, is the council justified in the position that they took?
Obviously, I disagree, but, I respect the court's decision.
All right, we'll leave it there. We could be on Kobo for the next hour if we tried. Hewell Perkins, you're up.
But it's really a matter of personalities here. Congressman John Conyers has endorsed you for the office of mayor of Detroit, and yet his wife, Council President Monica Conyers, is hemming and hawing, not quite sure who she will endorse. That's the question, too, about the relationships between the mayor and the city council, the animosities that tend to arise now and then. My question to you is, are you prepared today to recommend to the citizens of Detroit that they remove certain members of the council so that you can better serve them?
You want me to name names?
I want you to name names, if you're prepared.
I got to tell you, I'm not going there. And the reason why is politically and strategically, it would be foolhardy for me. I mean, especially, we can't in the same breath talk about trying to have a better relationship with council members, and then I'd be asked to turn around and say, this is who I think you ought to get rid of. Because it's not like that's not going to get back to them. So that's certainly, I mean, come on. So it would
if some of them are saying openly that they do not support you, I'm wondering
right.
if you are going to do the same.
Well, I mean, that's their right. And I'll be honest in saying that, when the time comes, there are probably certain council members that I may not vote for. But, at the end of the day, here's how I approach it. You don't have to like somebody to work with them. And I'm sure that all of you can probably relate to that, and that many people in the audience, not only in this room, but also folks that are listening on the radio or watching this streamed on the web. You've probably got people that you go to work with every single day that you cannot stand, but you work with them. You check the personal stuff at the door, and you come together, and you work together for the common purpose of doing whatever it is that you're supposed to do. And that's how I approach my job. That's how I approached it when I was on city council. And that's how I approach it as mayor. I mean, you don't have to like me, but if we can at least keep in mind that we're here for a purpose, we're here for a goal, a common goal, and that goal is to try to move the city of Detroit forward, that's how I think we ought to deal. But no, I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, this person ought to go and that person ought to go. doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
All right, Rochelle
Sorry.
Riley of the Detroit Free Press is up next.
Mr. Mayor, you have said in several interviews that you understand the importance of the school system and what needs to happen for Detroit to be rebuilt. The problem is you're not in charge of the schools.
Yeah.
So while many leaders talk about their hope for the schools, nothing really changes. Do you foresee, if you're elected if you're elected to continue to serve, your administration trying to do something to either take over the schools or work in a different way with the school leaders to improve that district, because you cannot succeed without that district?
I'm actually already working in a different way with the school district. As a matter of fact, since I've been in office, my administration has worked in partnership with the Board of Education on a couple of key issues. Mostly those issues have had to do with public safety issues. For example, shortly after the shooting that took place at Henry Ford High School last fall, I immediately called then Superintendent Connie Calloway and said, I'd like to sit down with you and talk about maybe some things that we can do. And we did that. And one of the things that actually came out of that was that our police chief and the chief of the Detroit Public Schools Public Safety Department also had a meeting, and that led to what is now a standing weekly meeting between both departments where they share information, talk about issues that affect both, discuss issues of police deployment around public schools, and it's been a very useful process. Some of what's come out of that is a preliminary public safety plan that focuses strictly on safety issues and what some people would refer to as a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of schools, mainly, again, high schools in the city of Detroit. The other thing that came out of it is that now our police department has been able to work with DPS Public Safety to get them using the same radio system, the CRISNet system, and that enables them to communicate immediately. And I didn't know this, I just thought all these guys were all on the same system, but it turned out actually that it used to be that if you were a Detroit public safety officer and you needed the assistance of the Detroit police, you had to call 911 from a landline or a cell phone, just like anybody else. We've eliminated that. So more recently, one of the other things that I did was a listening tour of 4 high schools in the city of Detroit, where I actually went into the schools to hear what was on the students' mind. We started out, we did, Tim, what was it we did? The first one was Central, and then we did Southeastern, Northwestern, and we wrapped up with Osborne, and it was very useful just to hear not only the kids' safety concerns, but also some of their suggestions and recommendations on things that should be done to improve safety in and around schools. More recently, this was actually last week, I did meet with the interim superintendent, and I'm also planning to meet with Mr. Bob to discuss common issues. So we are continuing to meet, and the idea of taking over the school system from a day-to-day management standpoint is something that I'm also interested and open to once we're out of this emergency financial manager arrangement, which I think we're going to be in for at least the rest of this year.
Let me ask just a quick follow, and it's a yes or no follow. If Plymouth businessman Robert Thompson came to you with $200 million today for 15 new high schools, would you take it?
Would they be charter schools?
They would be charter schools.
Here's the concern that I have with that. I think we have to be very careful about introducing several new charter schools into the city of Detroit. And the reason why, and this is how I look at it, I know you asked for a yes or no.
But you're the mayor, so.
The problem is the vast majority of kids in this country, not just in Detroit, are always going to be in public schools. And I know people hold charter schools out as this is the best alternative. This is where our kids ought to be. That's kind of like lifeboats on the Titanic. I mean, if you accept that public schools are a failing institution, then the solution is not to create more of these lifeboats in the form of charter schools. It's to keep the Titanic from sinking, because the majority of our kids are going to be in public schools. So I support competition. I think that having a certain degree of competition out there, whether it's charter, private schools, parochial schools, in the mix, that's good because it provides some choices. But most of our kids are going to be in public schools, so if we're going to address what's wrong with education, not only in this city but in this country, we got to deal with that. And charter schools are not going. You're not going to have enough of them. You've got to fix public schools.
So is that a no?
I would say that's a qualified no. Yes.
And I want to just do a quick follow-up. Same question I asked Mr. Bing is, once Mr. Bob's tenure at the Detroit Public Schools is deemed done,